No one warned us what would surface after the legend was gone. One quiet voice waited decades. When it finally spoke, Hollywood went silent. Stay with me, because near the end, a single decision will force you to rethink everything you thought you knew about Paul Newman. For half a century, Paul Newman stood as a symbol. Blue eyes, quiet integrity, a marriage praised as unbreakable, a man who seemed immune to scandal. The public saw consistency, grace, and control. What the public never saw was the cost of holding that image together. This story is not about tearing down a legend. It is about what happens when silence becomes a family inheritance. Questions always hovered, but no one pressed them. How did a man so present on screen feel so distant at home? Why did a family praised for unity rarely speak about emotion? Why did those closest to him choose restraint instead of explanation? Hollywood thrives on myths. Paul Newman became one of its strongest. He was talented, disciplined, charitable. He stayed married in an industry known for collapse. That alone made him exceptional. Yet the strongest myths often survive because no one looks too closely. Those who worked with him described control, precision, a man who chose words carefully and revealed little. Interviews stayed polished. Personal life stayed guarded. He was not cold, but he was contained. At home, that containment shaped everything. Paul Newman married Joanne Woodward in 1958. Their partnership became legendary. 2 actors, 2 careers, 1 household. For decades, magazines framed them as proof that Hollywood love could last. What rarely appeared in print was how that longevity demanded discipline, sacrifice, and silence. Their children grew up surrounded by success, awards on shelves, scripts on tables, cameras at the gate. Yet success does not equal warmth. Several family members later described a home where emotions stayed unspoken and questions stayed unanswered. Those accounts remain personal recollections and should be treated with care. Paul Newman valued privacy. He believed exposure weakened truth. That belief shaped his parenting. Praise was rare, distance was common, love existed, but it often traveled indirectly. One child, his son Scott Newman from a previous marriage, struggled deeply. Scott faced addiction, pressure, and identity conflict. In 1978, Scott died from a drug overdose at age 28. Paul Newman later described that loss as the greatest pain of his life. He founded the Scott Newman Center for Drug Abuse Prevention. This part of the story is documented and public. What remains less clear is how silence affected Scott before his death. Some accounts suggest emotional distance. Others emphasize regret and remorse afterward. What is certain is that the tragedy marked Paul Newman permanently. After Scott's death, Paul became more reserved. Friends noticed restraint deepen. Family noticed walls rise higher. Grief did not open him. It closed him.
Paul Newman redirected pain into work and philanthropy. He co-founded Newman's Own in 1982. Every after-tax dollar went to charity. By the time of his death, the company had donated hundreds of millions of dollars. This generosity cemented his moral image. Yet even generosity can exist alongside unresolved conflict. As the years passed, rumors followed him quietly. They never broke into the open. They never gained confirmation. Some suggested emotional attachments outside the marriage. Others hinted at identity struggles shaped by an unforgiving era. None were proven. None were acknowledged publicly. Any such claims remain unconfirmed. What matters more than rumor is response. Paul Newman never clarified. He never denied publicly. He never explained privately in ways that healed every relationship. Silence remained his default. Joanne Woodward stayed. She protected the image. She avoided confrontation in public. In later years, as her health declined, she retreated further. Alzheimer's disease took her memories slowly. The marriage endured on paper, even as communication faded. To the outside world, this looked like loyalty. Inside the family, it felt more complicated. When Paul Newman died in 2008, tributes flooded in. Actors praised his kindness. Journalists praised his discipline. Fans praised his humility. The legend felt complete. Then came the will. Paul Newman structured his estate carefully. Most of his wealth flowed into charitable foundations connected to Newman's Own. This was consistent with his values. However, the governance structure removed family members from control. That decision surprised many, including some within the family. There were no public accusations. There were no lawsuits that exploded across headlines. What followed instead was quiet fracture. Some family members expressed disappointment. Others expressed confusion. Publicly, they remained restrained. Years later, one voice shifted. Nell Newman, Paul's daughter, gave interviews reflecting on her father with honesty and restraint. She did not attack him. She did not dismantle his legacy. She described distance. She described complexity. She described love mixed with absence. Her words mattered because they were measured. She spoke about growing up around silence, about learning not to ask certain questions, about admiration that existed alongside hurt. These reflections did not reveal scandal. They revealed emotional cost. She acknowledged her father's greatness. She also acknowledged his limitations. That balance unsettled people. For decades, Paul Newman existed as a moral anchor in popular culture. When someone like that shows emotional blind spots, it challenges the comfort of simple narratives. Some listeners wanted denial. Others wanted confirmation of darker theories. Nell offered neither. She offered lived experience.
Speculation followed anyway. Online forums revived old rumors. Articles re-examined friendships. Private relationships were dissected without evidence. Responsible storytelling requires restraint here. None of those claims have been verified. They remain unconfirmed. What is verifiable is this: Paul Newman lived in an era where vulnerability carried professional risk. Male actors faced rigid expectations. Image mattered. Control protected careers. Paul Newman mastered control. That mastery helped him succeed. It also limited intimacy. Children do not need perfection. They need presence. They need explanation. Silence leaves room for interpretation, and interpretation often turns inward. Nell Newman described spending years trying to understand her father without access to his inner world. That absence shaped her. It also shaped how she viewed legacy. Legacy is often measured in awards and donations. Families measure it differently. They measure it in conversations they never had. Paul Newman gave the world extraordinary performances. He also gave it a model of discipline and restraint. What he did not always give was emotional clarity. This does not erase his goodness. It complicates it. After his death, Newman's own continued to grow. The foundation expanded. The brand strengthened. Paul Newman's face remained on labels. His voice remained absent from family dialogue. Some reports suggest internal disagreements about governance and mission. Those reports remain limited and unresolved. They underline a larger truth. Systems built to last often outlive the emotional bonds that created them. Joanne Woodward passed away in 2023. With her death, the last direct guardian of the myth disappeared. What remains now are memories, documents, and interpretations. Paul Newman cannot clarify his intentions. He cannot explain his silences. He cannot soften their impact. What remains is the question his life leaves behind. Can someone be deeply good and deeply flawed at the same time? Can generosity coexist with emotional distance? Can silence protect an image while harming a family? The answer appears to be yes. Paul Newman's story is not a scandal. It is a study in restraint, a study in legacy, a study in what happens when a man gives the world everything except access to his inner truth. Nell Newman did not destroy her father's image. She humanized it. That is harder to accept. Hollywood prefers heroes or villains. Real lives resist that structure. Paul Newman remains a great actor, a generous philanthropist, a complicated father. All of these can be true at once. As viewers, we inherit the myths we choose not to question. Stories like this ask us to pause. What does success cost? Who pays it? And how much silence feels acceptable? If this story made you rethink a legend, share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe for more long-form cinematic stories that explore what fame leaves behind.